The water in the bucket was freezing, a slurry of gray ice and grit that turned Alara's hands a bright, angry red. But she didn't stop scrubbing. She couldn't. The stone floors of the Silver Moon pack house were unforgiving, much like the wolves who lived above them. Scrub, rinse, repeat. It was the only rhythm Alara knew. At 22, she should have been presenting herself at the mating ball tonight. She should have been wearing silk, her hair curled, dancing under the chandeliers. But Alara was the runt, the wolfless orphan, the mistake her parents left behind when they died in the border wars. Missed a spot, runt. The voice was sharp, dripping with a cruelty that Alara knew too well. She didn't look up. She knew who it was. Jessica, the beta's daughter, the girl who had made Alara's life a living hell since they were children. A boot, made of fine Italian leather, kicked the bucket. Dirty water sloshed over the rim, soaking into the knees of Alara's threadbare dress. The cold bite of it made her gasp, but she bit her lip, tasting iron. "I'm sorry, Jessica," Alara whispered, keeping her head bowed. "I'll clean it up." "You're pathetic," Jessica sneered. "Tonight is the Alpha's ascension anniversary. Important guests are coming from the Northern Territories. And you—" She laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You smell like wet dog and misery. Stay out of sight. If I see your face upstairs, I'll have Father throw you in the kennel." Alara watched the expensive boots walk away, fighting back the sting of tears. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. It dehydrated you, gave you a headache, and changed nothing. She dipped her rag back into the freezing water. Just survive, she told herself. Just get through the night. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. 2 hours later, Alara was summoned to the kitchens. The head cook, a harried woman named Martha who was usually kind, shoved a heavy silver tray into Alara's shaking hands. "We're short-staffed," Martha hissed, wiping sweat from her brow. "Jessica's maid is sick. You need to take this wine up to the Alpha's table. Now." "Me?" Alara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. But Jessica said, "I don't care what that spoiled brat said," Martha snapped. "Alpha Marcus is waiting. Go, keep your head down, don't speak, and come right back." The walk to the banquet hall felt like a march to the gallows. The air grew warmer, thicker, heavy with the scent of roasted meats, expensive perfumes, and the overpowering musk of powerful wolves. Alara felt dizzy. Her human senses were dull compared to theirs, but even she could feel the power radiating from the room. She pushed open the heavy oak doors. The noise hit her first, a wall of laughter and clinking glass. Then the lights, hundreds of candles reflected in the crystal glasses. She moved like a ghost, hugging the wall, praying to be invisible. She reached the head table. Alpha Marcus sat there, drunk and loud. Beside him sat Jessica, looking radiant and predatory. Alara reached forward to place the wine decanter on the table. Her hand trembled. Just a little, but it was enough. "Oops," Jessica whispered, her foot shooting out under the table to hook around Alara's ankle. It happened in slow motion. Alara stumbled. The heavy crystal decanter flew from her grip. It shattered against the edge of the table, exploding in a shower of glass and dark red wine. The liquid sprayed everywhere, drenching the white tablecloth, splashing onto Alpha Marcus's lap, and ruining Jessica's silk dress. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence crashed over the room. The music stopped. The laughter died. All Alara could hear was the blood rushing in her ears and the soft drip, drip, drip of wine falling onto the marble floor. "You clumsy, useless little—" Jessica shrieked, jumping up. Her dress was stained blood red. Alpha Marcus rose slowly. He didn't shout, which was worse. His eyes, usually a dull brown, flashed a dangerous yellow. The beast was close to the surface. I'm so sorry, Alpha," Alara stammered, dropping to her knees, heedless of the broken glass cutting into her skin. "I tripped. I didn't mean—" "Silence," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You have ruined my dinner. You have insulted my guests." "She did it on purpose, Daddy," Jessica cried, playing the victim perfectly. "She's always been jealous of me. Look at my dress." Marcus looked down at Alara, disgust curling his lip. "I am tired of your incompetence, girl. We feed you, we clothe you, and this is how you repay us? By embarrassing this pack?" "Please," Alara whispered. "I'll clean it. I'll pay for the dress. Pay? Marcus laughed, a cruel, dry sound. With what money? You own nothing. You are nothing. He looked around the room, seeing his pack watching, waiting for his judgment. He had to be strong. He had to be cruel. We have a problem in the West Tower, Marcus said suddenly. A ripple of unease went through the crowd. Even Jessica went pale. The beast? Someone whispered. The prisoner hasn't eaten in 3 days, Marcus continued, a nasty smile forming. None of my warriors want to go near him. He's too volatile, too feral. Marcus looked down at Alara. Since you like to spill things, you can go feed him. Alara's blood ran cold. The West Tower. Everyone knew the stories. They said Alpha Marcus kept a monster there, a rogue wolf so big, so insane, that he ate men whole. Servants who went to the West Tower didn't come back the same. Some didn't come back at all. Alpha, please, Alara begged, her pride forgotten. Beat me, starve me, please don't send me there. Take her, Marcus ordered the guards. She cleans the beast's cell and feeds him. If she survives the night, maybe I'll forgive her. 2 massive guards hauled Alara up by her arms. Her legs dragged uselessly as they pulled her from the hall. The last thing she saw was Jessica, smirking, raising a wine-stained glass in a mock toast. Chapter 2. The stone steps leading down to the West Tower's dungeon were slick with moss and damp. The air grew colder with every step, smelling of earth, mildew, and something else. Something sharp and metallic. Blood. And underneath that, something wild. A scent like pine forests in winter, like ozone before a lightning strike. It was the most powerful scent Alara had ever smelled. Move, the guard grunted, shoving her toward the heavy iron door at the base of the stairs. He wouldn't even look at her. He was terrified. He shoved a bucket of raw meat into her hands and a mop. Throw the meat in, mop the blood. Don't look him in the eye. Wait, Alara cried, but the guard had already unlocked the door, pushed her inside, and slammed it shut. The lock clicked with a sound like a coffin closing. Darkness. Absolute, suffocating darkness. Alara stood with her back pressed against the cold iron door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. Hello? She whispered. Her voice trembled. From the far corner of the cell, a sound emerged, a low, vibrating rumble that shook the floorboards beneath her feet. It wasn't just a growl. It was thunder trapped in a throat. 2 eyes opened in the dark. Not yellow like Marcus's, not brown. They were gold, burning, molten gold, glowing with an inner light that illuminated the space around them, and they were massive. The creature rose. The sound of heavy chains dragging across stone echoed through the cell. He was huge. Even in the shadows, Alara could see the outline of a wolf the size of a warhorse. Muscle rippled under midnight black fur. He stepped into the sliver of moonlight filtering from the high barred window. His muzzle was scarred, his teeth bared in a snarl that promised death. Alara dropped the bucket. The raw meat spilled onto the floor. The wolf flinched at the sound, his ears flattening against his skull. He lunged. The chains pulled taut with a sickening crack, holding him back just feet from where she stood. He snapped his jaws, the sound like a bear trap closing. Alara scrambled back, pressing herself into the corner. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end, waiting for the teeth. But the attack didn't come. Instead, she heard sniffing, deep, wet inhales. The growling stopped. She opened one eye. The massive wolf was straining against the chains, but not to kill her. He was stretching his neck out, his nose twitching as he scented the air. He was smelling her. His golden eyes were locked on her face, the pupils blown wide. The rage in them was warring with something else. Confusion? Hunger? You're hungry, Alara whispered, her voice shaking. She pointed a trembling finger at the spilled meat. It's for you. The wolf didn't even look at the meat. He looked at her hand. Then he took a step back, the chains going slack. He lowered his massive head, resting it on his paws, but his eyes never left her. He looked sad. That was the only word for it. Beneath the terrifying size and the feral power, he looked agonizingly lonely. Alara felt that familiar tug in her chest, the same one she felt for stray cats and injured birds. Her fear began to recede, replaced by a foolish, dangerous compassion. They hurt you, don't they? She murmured. She saw the raw skin where the iron collar chafed his neck, the matted fur on his flank where old wounds hadn't healed right. The wolf let out a soft woof of breath. It wasn't an answer, but it wasn't a growl. Ilara hesitated. Then, moving slowly, she picked up the mop. I have to clean, she said, as if explaining herself to a person. If I don't, they'll punish me too. She took a step forward. The wolf watched her. He didn't move. She took another step. She began to mop the stone floor, keeping a wide arc around him. Every time she moved, his golden eyes tracked her. Not like prey, like she was the only source of light in a pitch-black room. Chapter 3. Hours passed. The dungeon was freezing, but Ilara was sweating from the exertion. She had cleaned the filth from the corners, scrubbing until her knuckles were raw. The wolf hadn't moved. He just watched. Finally, exhausted, she sank down against the wall, opposite him. She hugged her knees to her chest, shivering as the damp cold of the cell seeped into her bones. She closed her eyes, humming a soft tune. It was a lullaby her mother used to sing, a simple melody about the moon and the stars. A sound interrupted her. A low whine. Ilara opened her eyes. The wolf had dragged himself as close as the chains would allow. He was lying on his side now, looking at her. He made the sound again, a soft, pleading whimper. He nudged the air with his nose, gesturing toward her. You like the song? Ilara asked, feeling ridiculous. The wolf blinked slowly, a slow, deliberate blink. Okay, she whispered. She began to sing, the words soft and clear in the echoey cell. As she sang, the tension drained from the massive beast's body. His eyes drifted shut. For the first time, he slept. And looking at him, Ilara realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She was afraid for him. Because whoever this wolf was, he wasn't a monster. He was a prisoner, just like her. Suddenly, the wolf's ear twitched. His eyes snapped open, the gold burning bright again. He sat up, staring at the door. A second later, Ilara heard it too. Footsteps, heavy boots coming down the stairs. The wolf stood up, moving in front of Ilara. He placed his massive body between her and the door, a low, warning growl building in his chest that vibrated through the floor and into her bones. He was protecting her. The lock clicked. The door swung open. It was Jessica. She stood there, holding a lantern, a cruel smile on her face. Still alive, Runt? She asked, peering into the gloom. I'm disappointed. I brought a mop bucket for the leftovers. The wolf roared, a sound so loud it shook dust from the ceiling. He lunged at the door, the chains snapping tight, holding him inches from Jessica's face. Jessica shrieked, dropping the lantern and stumbling back. The glass shattered, the flame extinguishing. Control it, she screamed at the guards behind her. Shoot it if you have to. No, Ilara screamed. She didn't think. She just moved. She threw herself onto the wolf's back, burying her hands in his thick black fur. Stop. Don't hurt him. The wolf froze. Instantly. Under her hands, she felt his muscles lock up. He turned his head, his snout brushing against her arm. He sniffed her, inhaling deeply, and the rage simply vanished. In the doorway, the guards lowered their crossbows, their jaws dropping. Did you see that? One whispered. The runt. She tamed the beast. Jessica's face went purple with rage. She didn't tame anything. Get her out of there. Throw her in the kennels, and leave the beast to starve. No food for 3 days. The guards grabbed Ilara. This time she didn't fight. She looked back at the wolf. His golden eyes were fixed on hers, burning with a promise. I will find you, they seemed to say. I will find you. Chapter 4. Kaylin. The door slammed shut, plunging Kaylin back into darkness. But the darkness was different now. It lingered. Her scent, her vanilla, rainwater, and underneath it all, sadness. Deep, ancient sadness that mirrored his own. Kaylin paced the length of his chain, his claws clicking on the stone. His wolf was going insane. Mate, the beast inside him howled. Mate, mate, protect, kill them all. Kaylin fought for control. He pushed the wolf back, trying to think like a man, like a king. He had been in this cell for 6 months, betrayed by his own beta, poisoned with wolfsbane until his mind fractured, until he couldn't shift back to human form. They had dumped him here, in this backwater pack, telling Alpha Marcus he was a rogue, a weapon to be used. He had forgotten his name. He had forgotten his kingdom. He had been drowning in the madness of the feral wolf until tonight, until she walked in. The moment he smelled her, the fog in his mind cleared. It was like a lightning strike. The bond. The fated mate bond. It snapped into place with a violence that nearly brought him to his knees. She was tiny, fragile, a human, or close enough to one. Her hands were rough from work. Her dress was rags. But to his wolf, she was the most precious thing in the universe. And she had touched him. She had washed his wounds. She had sung to him. Kalen let out a low growl, tugging at the chains. The wolfsbane in his system was weakening. He could feel it, her proximity, the bond. It was healing him faster than any medicine. He needed to shift. He needed to become a man again. He needed to speak to her, to tell her who he was. But more importantly, he needed to burn this entire pack to the ground for how they treated her. He closed his eyes, focusing on the image of her face, the big brown eyes, the fear that turned to trust. Ilara. He didn't know her name, but his soul knew her. Soon he promised the darkness. Soon I will break these chains. And when I do, Alpha Marcus will wish he had never been born. Chapter 5. Ilara. 3 days passed. 3 days of stealing scraps from the kitchen, a loaf of stale bread, a leftover chicken leg, a wedge of hard cheese. 3 days of slipping down the cold stone stairs while the rest of the pack slept, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. I brought you something, Ilara whispered, sliding through the heavy iron door. The darkness of the cell didn't scare her anymore. In fact, it was the only place in the entire pack house where she felt safe. 2 golden eyes appeared in the gloom, blinking a welcome. The massive wolf was waiting for her, sitting on his haunches, his tail giving a single heavy thump against the floor. He didn't lunge for the food. He never did. He waited for her to sit cross-legged just out of reach of his chains. Only then did he eat, tearing into the meat with a savage grace that reminded her, always, that he was a predator. But he was her predator. Jessica was awful today, Ilara murmured, pulling her knees to her chest. She didn't know why she talked to him. Maybe because he was the only living soul who listened. She made me scrub the stairs with a toothbrush, said I wasn't worth the cost of a proper brush. The wolf stopped eating. A low growl vibrated in his throat, deep and dangerous. It's okay, Ilara soothed, reaching out a hand. I'm used to it. The wolf moved. He stretched the chain to its limit, pressing his massive scarred head against her small palm. The heat of him was startling. It seeped into her cold fingers, warming her blood, chasing away the chill of the dungeon. You're warm, she whispered, burying her fingers in his thick fur, like a furnace. He pushed harder against her hand, a silent demand for more contact. Ilara smiled, a rare, genuine smile. She scratched behind his ears, and the giant beast purred. It was a rough, rumbly sound, like stones grinding together, but it was undoubtedly a purr. You're not a monster, are you? She asked softly. I don't care what Alpha Marcus says. Monsters don't look at people the way you look at me. The wolf looked up. His eyes shifted. For a second, the gold receded, revealing a ring of human blue beneath. Intelligent, aware, and desperate. He opened his mouth, his jaws working as if trying to form words. A strangled sound came out. A half whine, half groan. He was trying to speak. Ilara leaned closer, her heart skipping. What is it? What are you trying to say? The wolf squeezed his eyes shut, his body trembling with effort. Mate. The word wasn't spoken, but Ilara felt it. She felt it vibrate in the air, felt it resonate in her own bones like a struck bell. She gasped, pulling back. Did you just speak? The wolf slumped, exhausted by the effort. He looked at her with apology in his eyes. Ilara stared at him, her mind racing. Wolves couldn't speak. Not unless there was a man trapped inside, fighting to get out. A man who was fighting the wolfsbane madness just to communicate with her. Who are you? She whispered. Who are you really? Chapter 6. Kalen. Mine. The word echoed in his mind, a constant drumbeat. Mine. Ilara. Mine. Every time she touched him, the fog receded a little more. Her scent, that miraculous mix of rain and vanilla, was the antidote to the poison in his veins. He watched her leave the cell, locking the door behind her. The click of the lock felt like a physical blow. He hated her leaving. His wolf howled to follow, to tear down the door, to slaughter anyone who looked at her wrong. But the man knew he had to wait. He looked at his paws. The claws were receding slightly. The fur on his forelegs was thinning. The shift was coming. It was painful. A slow grinding of bones that felt like being broken and put back together. But it was happening. He focused on the memory of her touch. She called me a monster, he thought bitterly. No, she said I wasn't one. That was the difference. Everyone else saw a beast to be feared or a weapon to be used. Ilara saw him. She saw the soul beneath the fur. Kalen closed his eyes and pushed. He pushed against the wolfsbane, using her image as an anchor. Come on, he growled internally. Shift, damn you. His shoulder popped. A scream of agony tore from his throat, but it sounded human. A human scream. He looked down, his hand. It wasn't a paw anymore. It was a hand, scarred, covered in dark hair, tipping into claws, but a hand nonetheless. He flexed his fingers. Triumph roared through him. It was working. He just needed more time, and more of her. But time, he realized with a jolt of dread, was something they didn't have. His enhanced hearing picked up footsteps upstairs. Heavy boots, and the voice of Alpha Marcus. I don't care about the price, Marcus was saying, his voice muffled by the stone floors. Just get him out of here. He's too dangerous to keep. Kalen went still. The fighting pits in the east are looking for new blood, another voice replied. A stranger, smelling of oil and greed. A beast that size? He'd be a champion. I'll give you 5,000 gold for him. Done, Marcus said. Take him tonight. Drug him, chain him, and get him off my land. Kalen snarled, the sound vibrating the walls. They were selling him, selling the Alpha King like a common dog to a fighting ring. If they took him away from Ilara, if they separated the bond now, before it was sealed, he would go mad, permanently. He had to warn her. He had to get out. He threw himself against the chains, ignoring the metal biting into his flesh. Ilara, he screamed in his mind, projecting the thought with every ounce of alpha power he had left. Ilara, run. Chapter 7. Ilara woke up gasping. The scream wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A sharp, piercing spike of panic that drove straight into her chest. She sat up in her narrow cot, clutching her chest. Beast? She whispered. The feeling was intense. Panic, rage, and a name. Ilara. He was calling her. She didn't know how, she didn't know why, but she knew he was in trouble. She scrambled out of bed, not bothering to put on shoes. She threw her thin shawl over her nightgown and opened her door. The hallway was quiet, but downstairs there was activity. Lights were on in the courtyard. A large transport truck was idling, its engine rumbling like a sleeping dragon. Ilara crept to the window. Men were moving carrying heavy chains and tranquilizer rifles. Load him up, she heard Marcus shout over the engine. And be careful, one bite and you're dead. No. Ilara's hand flew to her mouth. They were taking him. They were taking her friend. Her whatever he was. Without thinking, without planning, she ran. She flew down the back stairs, her bare feet silent on the wood. She burst out the kitchen door and sprinted across the dark courtyard toward the west tower. The cold snow bit at her feet, but she didn't feel it. She only felt the pull, the desperate, magnetic pull toward the dungeon. Hey, you! A guard shouted. Ilara didn't stop. She reached the heavy wooden door of the tower and threw her weight against it. It was unlocked. They were prepping to move him. She stumbled down the stone steps, practically falling into the darkness. Beast, she cried. Beast, they're coming! She reached the cell. The wolf was thrashing, foaming at the mouth, his eyes wild. But when he saw her, he froze. Ilara. The name whispered in her mind again. I won't let them take you, she sobbed, fumbling with the heavy keyring she had stolen from the sleeping guard days ago. She jammed the key into the lock. Her hands were shaking so bad she dropped it. No. Well, look what we have here. Ilara spun around. Jessica stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by two guards. She was wearing a fur coat, looking bored and beautiful. I knew you were sneaking down here, Runt. I just wanted to see what you were doing with the monster. Let him go, Jessica, Alara said, her voice shaking but defiant. She stood in front of the cell door, arms spread wide. He's not a monster. He's a person. I know he is. Jessica laughed. A person? Look at it, Alara. It's a rabid animal, and my father just sold it for 5,000 gold. You can't, Alara screamed. He's mine. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Yours? You think a wolfless piece of trash like you can claim a beast like that? She gestured to the guards. Grab her, and teach her a lesson about touching things that don't belong to her. The guards stepped forward. Alara backed up against the bars. Behind her, she felt the heat of the wolf. He was pressing against the iron, a low, continuous growl vibrating through her spine. Don't touch her, a voice rasped. Everyone froze. It wasn't the guards. It wasn't Alara. The voice came from the cell. It was deep, broken, like gravel grinding in a mixer. But it was human. Jessica's eyes went wide. Did it just speak? I said. The voice came again, stronger this time. Don't touch her. One of the guards reached for Alara, grabbing her hair. Alara screamed as he yanked her head back. That scream was the catalyst. Behind her, the chains snapped. Not the lock. The metal links themselves shattered like glass. Chapter 8. The explosion of power knocked Alara to the ground. Dust and stone rained down from the ceiling. A roar shook the foundations of the tower, a sound so loud it left her ears ringing. The cell door flew off its hinges, crushing the guard who had grabbed her against the far wall. Out of the darkness stepped a man. He was naked, magnificent, and terrifying. He stood over 6.5 feet tall, his body a map of corded muscle and ancient scars. His hair was long and black, falling over his face, but his eyes were the same burning gold. He didn't look at Jessica. He didn't look at the guards. He looked down at Alara, who was huddled on the floor. He knelt, his movement fluid and deadly. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice was the one she had heard in her head, deep, resonant, the voice of a king. Alara shook her head, too stunned to speak. He reached out a hand, a human hand, large and calloused, and brushed a tear from her cheek. I told you, he murmured. I told you I would find you. Kill him, Jessica shrieked, backing up the stairs. Shoot him, he's loose. The remaining guard raised his tranquilizer rifle. Kalen didn't even look up. He moved with a speed that blurred the air. One moment he was kneeling. The next, he was standing in front of the guard, his hand wrapped around the barrel of the rifle. With a simple twist of his wrist, he bent the steel barrel in half. The guard stared at it, then at Kalen, his face draining of color. Run, Kalen said softly. The guard didn't need to be told twice. He dropped the weapon and fled up the stairs, pushing past a screaming Jessica. Jessica stood alone at the top of the stairs. She looked down at Kalen, and for the first time in her life, Alara saw true fear in the bully's eyes. Do you know who I am? Kalen asked. His voice traveled up the stairwell, calm and cold. Jessica shook her head, unable to speak. I am Kalen Blackwood, he said. The name hit Alara like a physical weight. Kalen Blackwood, the Alpha King, the ruler of all the packs, the man who had disappeared a year ago, presumed dead. And you, Kalen continued, taking a step up the stairs. You hurt my mate. Mate? Jessica squeaked. But she's wolfless. She's a runt. She is a queen, Kalen roared, the sound shifting into a snarl at the end. His eyes flashed, his canines elongating. And this pack will pay in blood for every tear she has shed. He turned back to Alara, extending his hand. Come, my love, we have a kingdom to reclaim, and an execution to perform. Alara looked at his hand. It was huge, scarred and dangerous. But it was also the hand that had rested gently on his paws while she slept. It was the hand of the creature she had sung lullabies to. She reached up and placed her small, trembling fingers in his. As he pulled her to her feet, pulling her flush against his hard, naked chest, Alara felt a snap in her soul, a lock opening. Heat flooded her veins. Her senses sharpened. She could smell the fear radiating from Jessica upstairs. She could smell the pine and ozone of Kalen. My wolf, she whispered, realizing the truth. I wasn't wolfless. She was just waiting for you. Kalen smiled, and it was the most beautiful, terrifying thing she had ever seen. Then let us introduce her to the world. He swept her up into his arms, carrying her up the stairs toward the light, toward the judgment that awaited Alpha Marcus. Chapter 9. The courtyard was in chaos. The guard who had fled had raised the alarm. Alpha Marcus stood by the transport truck, surrounded by 20 of his best warriors. They held spears, rifles, and torches. "What is going on?" Marcus bellowed. "Where is the beast?" "Right here," a voice boomed from the tower entrance. Kaelin stepped out into the snowy night, carrying Alara. He was naked, unarmed, and outnumbered 20-1. And yet, he looked like the only dangerous thing in the yard. Marcus squinted, then his face went slack. "Kaelin," he whispered. "King Kaelin? But you're dead. My beta said you were dead." "Your beta lied," Kaelin said, walking down the steps. The warriors parted before him, instinctively lowering their weapons. An Alpha King's aura was not something you could fight. It was gravity. It forced you to your knees. "I was betrayed," Kaelin said, his voice carrying over the wind. "Poisoned, driven mad, and sold to you like cattle." He stopped 10 feet from Marcus. He gently set Alara down, keeping one hand on her shoulder. "And you treated the woman who saved my soul like garbage." Marcus looked at Alara, then back at Kaelin. He started to shake. "I didn't know, Your Majesty. She's just a servant. She has no wolf." "She has me," Kaelin growled, "and that is more power than you will ever know." "Kaelin," Alara whispered, tugging his arm. "Your clothes." Kaelin looked down at himself, then shrugged. "I am a wolf, little one. Clothes are an afterthought." He looked back at Marcus. "Kneel." It wasn't a request. It was a command laced with alpha power so potent that Alara felt her own knees wobble. Marcus dropped. His warriors dropped. Even Jessica, who had followed them out, collapsed into the snow, sobbing. The entire Silver Moon pack was on its knees before the beast and the runt. "This pack is forfeit," Kaelin declared. "Your lands are mine. Your lives are mine." He turned to Alara, his golden eyes softening. "What would you have me do with them, my queen? Their fate is in your hands." Alara looked at the people who had tormented her. Jessica, who had mocked her poverty. Marcus, who had almost sold a man to a death camp. Martha, the cook, who was watching from the kitchen door with wide, fearful eyes. Martha had been kind, in her own way. "Spare the innocent," Alara said, her voice stronger than she thought possible. "But the leaders, Marcus and his family, they have to go. Banish them." Kaelin grinned. "A mercy I would not have granted, but as you wish." He turned to Marcus. "Run. If you are still on my land by sunrise, I will hunt you down, and I will not be gentle." Chapter 10. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the snow-covered forest road, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predator eyes. Alara sat in the back of the lead vehicle, wrapped in a blanket that cost more than her entire life's earnings. Beside her sat Kaelin. He had finally allowed a guard to give him a shirt, a black tactical button-up that strained against his shoulders, but he refused to stop touching her. His hand rested on her knee, his thumb tracing frantic, soothing circles on her skin. He was staring at her as if she might vanish if he blinked. "You're staring," Alara whispered, leaning her head against the leather seat. She was exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading into a bone-deep weariness. "I am memorizing you," Kaelin replied, his voice deep and rough. "For 6 months I saw nothing but stone walls and darkness. You are the first beautiful thing my eyes have seen." Alara blushed, pulling the blanket tighter. "I'm not beautiful, Kaelin. I'm a servant. I'm covered in dungeon grime and—" "You are my queen," he interrupted, the alpha command slipping into his tone. "And if you ever disparage yourself again, I will spend the rest of our lives proving you wrong. Every single hour." The conviction in his voice made her heart stutter. She looked out the window. "Where are we going?" "Home," Kaelin said. "Blackwood Castle. It sits on the edge of the cliffs, overlooking the sea. It has been empty since the betrayal." His hand tightened on her knee. "Your beta," Alara remembered. "The one who poisoned you." Kaelin's expression darkened, the golden light in his eyes flaring. "Silas. He was my brother in everything but blood. He fed me the wolfsbane wine. He watched me twist and break. He told the council I had gone mad with power and needed to be put down. He thinks I'm dead, Kaelin growled. He thinks Marcus killed me months ago. When we arrive, the castle will be under his control, or so he thinks. Alara felt a spike of fear. Is it safe? Kaelin smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the wolf in the dark. For you, it will be the safest place on Earth. For him, it will be a slaughterhouse. The car slowed. We're here. Alara looked up. Looming ahead, rising out of the mist like a jagged tooth, was the castle. It was massive, built of black stone and obsidian glass, terrifying and magnificent. Guards stood at the gate. As the convoy approached, Kaelin rolled down the window. The cold night air rushed in. The guard stepped forward, looking bored. State your business. The castle is closed by order of Alpha Silas. Kaelin leaned forward into the light. Open the gate, he said softly. The guard froze. His flashlight beam wavered, shaking in his hand. He peered into the car, his eyes widening until they looked like dinner plates. King Kaelin? He stammered. But the funeral, we buried you. A mistake, Kaelin said dryly. Open the gate and sound the horn. Tell Silas his king has returned. The guard scrambled back, hitting the release button so hard he nearly tripped. As the heavy iron gates swung open, a deep, mournful horn blasted from the watchtower, echoing across the valley. Kaelin turned to Alara. Stay close to me. Do not leave my side. The car pulled up to the grand entrance. Dozens of people were already pouring out of the doors. Servants, warriors, courtiers, all looking confused and terrified. Kaelin stepped out. A hush fell over the crowd. He was barefoot. His hair was wild. He wore only a shirt and trousers borrowed from a guard, but he radiated power. The alpha aura rolled off him in waves, forcing the weaker wolves to drop to their knees. He turned back to the car and extended his hand to Alara. She hesitated. She was wearing a torn servant's dress, stained with the blood of the wolf she had saved. She looked like a beggar. Take my hand, Kaelin whispered. Let them see you. She placed her hand in his. He pulled her out, tucking her firmly against his side. Behold, Kaelin's voice boomed across the courtyard. This is Alara. She is the one who broke the curse. She is my true mate. And from this night forward, she is your Luna. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. And you know the penalty for treason. The pack bowed. It was a wave of submission, ripples of bodies dropping to the cold stone. Chapter 11. The interior of the castle was a blur of gold and velvet. Servants rushed to prepare the master suite, their eyes darting nervously toward Kaelin as if they expected him to shift and devour them at any moment. Alara felt their fear. It tasted like sour milk in the air. They're afraid of you, she whispered as he led her up the grand staircase. Good, Kaelin muttered. Fear keeps them loyal until trust can be rebuilt. He kicked open the double doors to the master bedroom. It was enormous. A fireplace large enough to stand in roared with fresh logs. A bed the size of a small island sat in the center, draped in furs. But Alara only had eyes for one thing, the bathroom. Through the open door, she saw a sunken tub made of black marble, steaming with hot water. She let out a small, involuntary whimper. She hadn't been clean, truly clean, in years. Kaelin heard it. He stopped looking down at her. His expression softened, the hard lines of the king melting away to reveal the man. You're tired, he said, and you're hurt. He lifted her chin. There was a smear of dirt on her cheek, a scratch on her neck from where the guard had grabbed her. His eyes flared gold. I should have killed them slower, he growled. No, Alara said, placing her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart thundering beneath the skin. It's over. I just want to be clean. Then let me serve you, Kaelin said. The words shocked her. An alpha king serving a servant? But he was already moving. He led her into the bathroom, turning on the gold taps until the room filled with steam. He grabbed a bottle of expensive bath oil, lavender and sandalwood, and poured it in. Kaelin, you don't have to, Alara protested as he knelt to test the water temperature. I can do it. You cleaned my cage, he said, not looking up. You wiped the blood from my fur when I was too weak to stand. You fed me when you were starving. He stood up and turned to her, his eyes burning with intensity. "Let me take care of you, Alara. Please." It was the please that broke her. She nodded. Kalen reached out, his large, calloused hands trembling slightly as he undid the buttons of her ragged dress. The fabric fell away, pooling at her feet. Alara shivered, feeling exposed, ashamed of her thin frame, her scars. But Kalen didn't look at her with judgment. He looked at her with worship. "Perfect," he breathed. He lifted her effortlessly, lowering her into the hot water. Alara groaned as the heat seeped into her frozen muscles. It stung her cuts, but it was a good sting, a healing sting. Kalen rolled up his sleeves. He took a soft sponge, lathered it with soap, and began to wash her. He started with her arms, moving in slow, rhythmic circles. The sensation was overwhelming, the intimacy of it. This powerful, dangerous man kneeling on the tile floor, washing the grime from her skin with the tenderness of a mother with a child. "Does this hurt?" he asked, washing the bruise on her shoulder where the rifle butt had hit her. "No," she whispered. "It feels nice." He moved to her back. She leaned forward, resting her forehead on her knees, closing her eyes. She felt his hands, strong and sure, working the tension out of her spine. "I thought I would die in that cell," Kalen admitted softly. His voice echoed off the marble walls. "Every day the wolf took more of me. I forgot my mother's face. I forgot my own name. But then you came." His hands paused on her shoulders. "Why did you sing to me?" Alara turned her head to look at him. "Because you looked lonely," she said simply. "And I know what it's like to be trapped in a place where everyone hates you." Kalen's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her wet shoulder. "Never again," he vowed against her skin. "You will never be lonely again." The atmosphere in the room shifted. The steam seemed to thicken. Kalen's touch changed. It wasn't just caretaking anymore. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin at the base of her neck. Alara's breath hitched. The bond flared between them, a sudden hot pull that made her water splash. "Kalen," she breathed. He froze. He looked at her, his pupils blown wide, the gold swallowing the brown. "I should stop," he rasped. "I should leave you to bathe." "Do you want to stop?" she asked. The question hung in the humid air. "No," he admitted. "I want to climb into that tub with you. I want to claim you until you smell like nothing but me. I want to erase every bad memory you have and replace them with this." He leaned over the tub, bracing his hands on either side of her. "But I won't. Not yet." Alara frowned, disappointment heavy in her chest. "Why?" "Because you are overwhelmed," he said gently. "You have gone from a dungeon to a castle in one night. You are exhausted. And He looked away. "The wolfsbane is still in my blood. My control is fragile. If I start," he looked back at her, his gaze searing, "I will not be able to stop. And I want our first time to be because you want it, not because the bond is forcing us." He stood up, grabbing a thick, fluffy towel from the rack. "Finish your bath, my queen. I will be right outside the door, guarding you." He walked out, closing the door behind him. Alara sank back into the water, her heart racing. He was right. She was exhausted. But God, she wanted him. She wanted the beast. Chapter 12. Silas. In the east wing of the castle, in an office that used to belong to Kalen, Beta Silas paced. He was a handsome man, in a sharp, reptilian way. Slicked back blonde hair, pale blue eyes, and a suit that cost more than most pack members made in a year. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking so hard the crystal chattered against his teeth. "Alive," he hissed to himself. How is he alive? The plan had been perfect. Poison the king slowly. Drive him mad. Lock him away until he was nothing but a drooling beast. Then dispose of him quietly and claim the throne as the grieving best friend who stepped up to save the pack. He had paid Alpha Marcus a fortune to keep the beast contained. He had been so sure Kalen was gone. And now the horn had sounded. The king was back, and he had a mate. "A mate," Silas spat, throwing the glass into the fireplace. It shattered, the alcohol flaring blue for a second. A mate changed everything. A mated alpha was stronger, more stable. The bond would burn the remaining poison out of his system twice as fast. And worse, a mate gave him something to fight for. "Sir?" A nervous voice came from the doorway. It was one of Silas's spies. "What?" Silas snapped. "The king he's asking for the council to convene, tomorrow morning. He says there will be a trial." A trial. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. Kaelin knew. Of course he knew. He wasn't stupid. "Who is she?" Silas asked. "The mate. Who is she?" "Her name is Alara, sir. She was a servant in the Silver Moon Pack, a wolfless nobody." Silas paused. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Wolfless?" "Yes, sir. No wolf spirit detected. Just a human, basically." Silas laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Perfect," he whispered. "Kaelin's weakness has always been his heart. He falls for broken things." He walked to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside sat a small velvet box. Inside the box was a ring. Not a wedding ring. A ring made of pure silver, embedded with a stone of concentrated wolfsbane. A relic from the old wars. "If I can't kill the king," Silas murmured, "I'll kill the queen. And without his anchor, the beast will return." He looked at the spy. "Prepare the men. We don't run. We attend the trial, and we bring a gift for the new Luna." Chapter 13. Alara slept in the massive bed, buried under furs. She didn't dream of cleaning floors. She didn't dream of Jessica's cruelty. She dreamed of golden eyes watching over her. She woke to the smell of food, real food, bacon, eggs, freshly baked bread. She sat up. Kaelin was sitting in a chair by the window, watching her. He was dressed now in fine clothes, a black shirt, dark trousers, but he still looked wild. He held a tray of food. "Eat," he said softly. "You need your strength. Today will be difficult." Alara took the tray. She ate ravenously, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal in ever. "What happens today?" she asked between bites. "The council," Kaelin said grimly. "I have to present you to them, to the elders. And I have to face Silas." The name made the room feel colder. "Will he be there?" "He has to be. If he runs, he admits guilt. He's arrogant. He'll try to talk his way out of it. He'll try to turn them against me. He'll say I'm still mad, that the beast is still in control." Kaelin stood up and walked to the bed. He sat on the edge. "They will test me, Alara. They will try to provoke the wolf, and they will try to use you against me. They will say a wolfless mate makes me weak." "Does it?" Alara asked, putting the tray aside. "Does it make you weak?" Kaelin leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "It makes me human," he whispered. "The wolf gives me power. You give me reason. Without you, I am just teeth and claws." He pulled back, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a necklace. It was a simple leather cord with a pendant, a piece of raw, uncut obsidian wrapped in silver wire. "This contains a protective rune," he explained, fastening it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, sending those familiar sparks dancing down her spine. "It won't stop a bullet, but it will block any mental influence. Vampires, witches, or alphas trying to command you." "Can you command me?" she asked, touching the cold stone. Kaelin smirked. "I tried yesterday. I told you to stay back. You jumped on my back instead. I don't think my alpha voice works on you, little one. You're too stubborn." Alara smiled. "Good. Get dressed," Kaelin said, standing up. "I had the tailors bring everything. Choose whatever you want, but choose something red." "Why red?" "Because it's the color of war," Kaelin said, his eyes flashing. "And today, we go to war." 30 minutes later, Alara stood before the mirror. The dress was magnificent. Deep crimson silk, fitted at the waist, flowing to the floor like a river of blood. It had long sleeves and a high neck, modest but powerful. She looked like a queen. She didn't look like the runt anymore. She looked like someone who could stand beside a monster and not flinch. Kaelin stepped up behind her, his dark reflection towering over hers. He placed his hands on her waist. "Ready?" he asked. Alara took a deep breath. She thought of the years of abuse. She thought of Jessica. She thought of the cold dungeon floor. She touched the obsidian necklace. "Yes," she said, "let's go get them." They walked out of the room, hand in hand. The corridors were lined with guards who snapped to attention as they passed. This wasn't just a walk to a meeting, it was a procession. They reached the council chamber doors. They were 20 feet tall, carved with scenes of the first wolves. Inside, the murmur of voices was loud, argumentative. Kaelin stopped. He turned to her. "Whatever happens in there," he said intensely, "do not leave the circle. Silas is desperate. A desperate wolf bites." "I trust you," Alara said, and she meant it. Kaelin nodded. He kicked the doors open. The boom echoed like a cannon shot. The room fell silent. Kaelin strode in, pulling Alara with him, straight into the pit of vipers. And sitting at the head of the table, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes, was Silas. "Welcome back, old friend," Silas called out, his voice smooth as oil. "We were just discussing your condition." Chapter 14. The council chamber smelled of old paper, burning wax, and the dry, dusty scent of the elders. 5 of them sat on a raised dais, their faces lined with age and skepticism. But the sharpest scent in the room came from Silas. It was cloying, sweet, like rotting fruit masked by heavy cologne. Condition? Kaelin's voice was steady, though Alara could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a furnace. "I was under the impression we were discussing your treason, Silas." Silas chuckled, a low, smooth sound that made Alara's skin crawl. He stood up, smoothing his expensive suit. "Treason? An ugly word, Your Majesty. I prefer intervention." He turned to the elders, spreading his hands. "Honored elders, you all remember the state of our king 6 months ago. Erratic, violent. He nearly tore the throat out of a visiting diplomat. I acted to save the pack from a leader who had lost his mind." "He poisoned me," Kaelin growled. The sound made the candles flicker. "He laced my wine with wolfsbane for months, weakening me, driving the wolf insane." "Allegations," Silas dismissed with a wave of his hand. "The ravings of a man recovering from a psychotic break. And look at him now." Silas pointed an accusatory finger at Kaelin. "He disappears for half a year, leaving the pack vulnerable, and he returns. With this." His gaze landed on Alara. It felt like slime. "A servant girl, a wolfless cripple from a lesser pack. He claims she is his mate. I ask you, does this look like the judgment of a sane king?" The elders murmured amongst themselves. Alara felt herself shrinking. The runt. That's all they saw. A girl in a red dress playing dress-up. She looked at Kaelin. His jaw was clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. He was fighting the urge to rip Silas apart right there. But if he attacked now, he proved Silas right. "She is not a cripple," Kaelin said, his voice deadly quiet. "She is the only reason I am standing here. She broke the madness you inflicted." "Did she?" Silas stepped down from the table, walking slowly toward them. "Or is she just another symptom of it? A pet you picked up in your delirium?" He stopped a few feet away. His eyes were cold, calculating. "If she is truly your mate, Kaelin, she would be strong. She would be an alpha female worthy of this pack, but I smell nothing." He sniffed the air theatrically. "Just human weakness and fear." "I'm not afraid of you," Alara said. Her voice was small, but it didn't shake. Silas raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the pet speaks." "I am not a pet," Alara said, stepping forward, moving slightly in front of Kaelin. "And I know what you did. I saw the records in the West Tower. I know you paid Alpha Marcus to keep Kaelin in a cage." "Lies," Silas hissed, his smile slipping. "You have no proof." "I have the king," Alara said, lifting her chin. "And the king stands. The king speaks. The king is sane. The only madness in this room is your ambition." Silence fell over the chamber. The elders were watching her now, not with disdain, but with curiosity. A wolfless girl standing up to an alpha beta? It was unheard of. Kaelin looked down at her, pride blazing in his eyes. Silas's face twisted. He reached into his pocket. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness, "if we are to move forward, we must test this bond. If she is truly your Luna, she will accept the pack's tribute." He pulled out the velvet box. Alara's heart skipped a beat. The ring. The poisoned ring he had prepared. "A peace offering," Silas said, opening the box. The silver ring glinted in the candlelight. The stone in the center was dark, almost black. A family heirloom for the new queen. He held it out to Alara. "Take it, my dear. Put it on. Prove you are one of us." Kaelin tensed. He opened his mouth to stop her, to knock the box away. But Alara grabbed his arm, silencing him. She stared at the ring. She didn't have a wolf sense. She couldn't smell magic or intent like they could. But she knew plants. She knew herbs. She had spent years in the kitchens, identifying spices by scent alone. And coming from the box, underneath the smell of metal polish, was a faint, acrid odor, like bitter almonds and rot. Wolfsbane. Concentrated. Deadly to a shifter. But to a human? To someone without a wolf, it would just make her sick. It wouldn't kill her. Not instantly. Alara looked at Silas. He was smiling, expecting Kaelin to panic, expecting Kaelin to attack to save her, proving his instability. It was a trap. If Kaelin attacked, he lost the council. If Alara put it on and died, Kaelin would go mad with grief. Silas won either way. Unless... Alara reached out. "It's beautiful," she said. "Don't," Kaelin choked out. "Alara, it's fine, my king," she interrupted, looking him in the eye. "Trust me." She picked up the ring. Silas's eyes glittered with triumph. Alara brought the ring to her nose. She sniffed it loudly. Then she smiled. "Aconitum lycoctonum," she said clearly. "Wolfsbane, mixed with arsenic." She looked at the elders. "Is it customary for a peace offering to be dipped in poison?" The elders gasped. Silas froze. "What? That's ridiculous. I cleaned the king's cage," Alara said, her voice rising. "I know the smell of the poison you used on him. It smells exactly like this." She threw the ring. It hit the stone floor with a clink and skittered toward the elders. "Check it," Kaelin commanded, his voice thunderous. An elder picked it up, sniffed it cautiously, and recoiled. "Poison," the elder confirmed, looking at Silas with horror. "You tried to assassinate the Luna in the council chamber?" Silas's mask crumbled. The smooth reptilian charm vanished, replaced by pure, feral rage. "She is no Luna," he screamed. "She is a human mistake, and you..." He pointed at Kaelin. "You are weak. You let a bitch fight your battles." "She fights beside me," Kaelin said, stepping forward. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with static. "Which is more than you ever did." "Enough," Silas roared. Plan B. Chapter 15. The windows of the council chamber shattered inward. Glass rained down like diamonds. 4 large wolves leaped through the openings. Silas's loyalists. The elders scrambled back, shouting for guards. But the guards at the door were already down, betrayed by their own. Silas shifted. It was a grotesque transformation. His skin tore apart, revealing fur that was patchy and gray. He wasn't a noble wolf. He was a mangy, hulking beast, foam dripping from his jaws. He didn't go for Kaelin. He went for Alara. "Kaelin!" Alara screamed as the massive gray wolf lunged at her. But Kaelin was already moving. He didn't shift. He didn't have time. He tackled Silas mid-air, a human man wrestling a monster. They crashed into the table, splintering wood and sending chairs flying. "Get back!" Kaelin roared at her, landing a punch on the wolf's snout that cracked bone. But the other 4 wolves were circling. They sensed Kaelin was distracted. They sensed the weakness. The girl. One of the loyalist wolves snapped at Alara's heels. She grabbed a heavy brass candelabra from the floor and swung it with all her might. Clang! It connected with the wolf's skull. The beast yelped and backed off, surprised. "I am not a victim," Alara yelled, swinging the heavy metal again. But there were too many. Kaelin was pinned under Silas, his human strength failing against the alpha wolf's jaws snapping inches from his throat. He needed to shift. But if he shifted, the wolf's bane in his blood might take over again. He might lose himself. He looked at Alara. She was backed into a corner, swinging the candelabra, terror in her eyes. One of the wolves had her hem in its teeth. "No," Kaelin growled. The love he felt for her, the fierce, protective, consuming need to keep her safe. It burned hotter than the poison. It burned hotter than the madness. He let go. Not to the madness, to the bond. He drew strength from her courage, from her stubborn refusal to die. Kaelin roared, and the sound wasn't human anymore. His body exploded into fur and muscle. The Midnight King returned. He was twice the size of Silas, a giant black nightmare of a wolf with eyes of burning gold. He threw Silas off him like a rag doll. Silas hit the wall with a sickening crunch and slumped to the floor, dazed. Kalen turned on the other wolves. He was a blur of motion. A snap of his jaws broke a leg. A swipe of his paw sent a wolf flying across the room. He was efficient, brutal, a king reclaiming his throne in blood. Within seconds, the loyalist wolves were whimpering in the corners or unconscious. Only Silas remained. The gray wolf shook his head, standing up shakily. He looked at Kalen, then at Alara. He realized he couldn't win. So he decided to take something with him. Silas launched himself. Not at Kalen, at Alara. He moved faster than thought, a desperate suicidal lunge to tear out the throat of the queen. Alara! Kalen howled, leaping, but he was too far away. Alara didn't scream. She didn't run. She dropped to her knees, making herself small, and held up the obsidian necklace Kalen had given her. The protective rune. As Silas opened his jaws to crush her skull, his teeth grazed the obsidian stone. Flash! A pulse of purple light exploded from the necklace. It wasn't an attack spell. It was a shield. But the force of Silas's momentum hitting the magical barrier repelled him backward with the force of a cannonball. He flew across the room, smashing through the heavy oak doors and landing in the hallway, broken and still. Silence returned to the room. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light from the broken windows. Kalen stood panting, his black fur matted with blood that wasn't his. He turned slowly toward Alara. His eyes were wild. Gold fire. He took a step toward her, a low growl in his throat. The elders gasped, terrified. "He's lost it," one whispered. The madness took him. But Alara knew better. She stood up, her red dress torn, her hair wild, looking every inch the queen she was meant to be. "Kalen," she said softly. The giant wolf stopped. He lowered his head, his ears flattening. He whined, a high, puppy-like sound that seemed impossible coming from such a beast. He crawled toward her on his belly, submissive, begging. She reached out and buried her hands in his ruff. "I'm here," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his massive snout. "I'm safe. You saved me." The wolf let out a long, shuddering breath. And then, right there in the council chamber, amidst the wreckage and the blood, he began to shift back. When the man looked up at her, naked and exhausted, his eyes were clear. The madness was gone, burnt away by the bond. "Alara," he croaked. "My mate. My king," she replied, smiling through her tears. Kalen stood up, unashamed of his nudity, his power rolling off him in waves. He looked at the elders, who were cowering in their seats. "Silas is dead," he declared, his voice ringing with finality. "The traitor is gone. Does anyone else wish to challenge my claim? Or my queen?" The elders scrambled down from the dais, bowing so low their foreheads touched the floor. "Long live the king," they chanted, their voices trembling. "Long live Luna Alara." Kalen didn't even look at them. He scooped Alara into his arms, burying his face in her neck. "Let's go home," he whispered against her skin. "I believe we have a bath to finish." Chapter 16. The Aftermath. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The pack was purged of Silas's loyalists. The castle was cleaned, the broken windows repaired, the blood scrubbed from the stone. But for Alara and Kalen, the world had shrunk to the size of the master suite. They spent days in bed, recovering, talking, simply existing in each other's space. Kalen was clingy. There was no other word for it. He refused to let her out of his sight. If she went to the library, he followed. If she sat by the fire, he was at her feet, his head in her lap. He was making up for 6 months of solitude, drinking her presence like water in a desert. And Alara flourished. Good food, rest, and the adoration of a king had transformed her. Her skin glowed, her curves filled out. She walked with her head held high. But there was one thing left to do. The mating wasn't complete. They had the bond, they had the love, but the physical claiming. Kalen had been waiting. He was terrified of hurting her, terrified that his wolf was still too close to the surface. But tonight felt different. The full moon hung heavy and bright over the ocean outside their window. The air in the bedroom was thick with scent. Alara sat at her vanity, brushing her hair. She wore a slip of white silk, delicate and sheer. She watched Kalen in the mirror. He was standing on the balcony, staring at the moon. He turned, and their eyes met in the glass. "Come here," he said. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating with a hunger he had held in check for too long. Ilara put down the brush. She walked to him, her bare feet silent on the rug. She stopped inches from him. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "You smell like heaven," he murmured. "And you smell like trouble," she teased, though her breath hitched. "Trouble?" He smirked, pulling her closer until her body was flush against his. "I'll show you trouble." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was acclaiming. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting, devouring. His hands roamed her body, possessive and demanding, memorizing every curve. He lifted her, carrying her to the bed, and laid her down on the furs. "Are you sure?" he asked, hovering over her, his eyes glowing gold. "Once I mark you, once I bite you, our souls are tied forever. There is no going back. You will be stuck with a beast for eternity." Ilara reached up, tangling her fingers in his dark hair. She pulled him down. "I don't want to go back," she whispered against his lips. "I love the beast, and I love the man. Mark me, Kaelin. Make me yours." With a groan that sounded like a prayer, Kaelin buried his face in her neck. His teeth grazed the sensitive skin over her pulse. He paused, giving her one last chance to pull away. She arched into him, a silent plea. He bit down. The pain was sharp, electric, but it was instantly followed by a rush of pleasure so intense it made her vision white out. She felt him, not just his body but his soul, his joy, his fierce protection, his overwhelming love. It flooded her veins, knitting their spirits together into a knot that could never be untied. "Mine," he roared, the sound echoing through the room. "Yours," she gasped back. "Always." Chapter 17. The morning sun hit the Blackwood Cliffs, turning the ocean below into a sheet of hammered copper. Ilara woke slowly, stretching her limbs against sheets that felt like clouds. For the first time in her life, she didn't wake up cold. A heavy arm was draped over her waist, anchoring her to the bed. Kaelin was asleep, his face buried in the crook of her neck, his breath warm and steady against her skin. She shifted slightly, and his arm tightened instinctively, pulling her flush against his chest even in sleep. "Mine," he grumbled, nuzzling her hair. Ilara smiled. The bond hummed between them, a golden thread of connection that felt settled, permanent. The frantic hunger of the previous night had faded into a deep, abiding contentment. She traced the scars on his arm with her fingertip. "Wake up, lazy bones," she whispered. "You have a pack to run." Kaelin groaned, opening one golden eye. "I'm the king," he rumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "I can abolish mornings, make it a law." "I don't think that's how monarchy works," Ilara teased. He rolled over, pinning her beneath him with a playful growl. "I can do whatever I want, and right now, I want you." He kissed her, slow and deep, erasing her protests. But eventually reality called. There were reports to sign, borders to secure, and a new life to build. As Ilara dressed, in a gown of soft blue wool that Kaelin insisted brought out the color of her eyes, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the runt anymore. Her posture was straight, her eyes bright. On her neck, the mating mark was healing, a visible symbol of her protection. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a Luna. Chapter 18. 6 months later, the garden of Blackwood Castle had been transformed. Where there were once overgrown thorns, there were now rows of medicinal herbs, blooming flowers, and vegetables. Ilara knelt in the dirt, her hands busy weeding a patch of lavender. "Luna?" A young guard approached, bowing his head respectfully. "The delegation from the Northern Pack has arrived. Alpha Kaelin is asking for you." Ilara stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands. "Thank you, Thomas." She walked through the castle, marveling at the changes. The dark, oppressive atmosphere was gone. Windows were open, letting in the sea breeze. Servants hummed as they worked. When she entered the great hall, Kaelin was seated on his throne, looking bored as a pompous visiting alpha droned on about trade routes. But the moment Kaelin saw her, his face lit up. He stood, ignoring the visiting alpha mid-sentence, and walked down the steps to meet her. He took her hand, kissing the knuckles stained with garden soil. "My queen," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You smell like earth and sunshine." "And you smell like politics," she whispered back, making him chuckle. The visiting alpha looked affronted. "King Kaelin, is this your mate? A human?" "She is my heart," Kaelin said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning growl threading through it. "Do you have an issue with that?" The visitor took one look at the gold fire in Kaelin's eyes and shook his head quickly. "No, no issue." Kaelin smirked. "Good. Now sit down. My wife has suggestions about your trade routes, and you will listen to every word she says." Chapter 19. Hundreds of miles away, in a dirty, crowded city where the snow turned to gray slush within minutes, a woman scrubbed the floor of a tavern. Her hands were red and chapped, her nails broken. "Hurry up with that floor," the tavern owner shouted, throwing a rag at her head. "Tables 4 and 5 need clearing." Jessica wiped a strand of greasy hair from her face. She looked older, harder. The fine Italian leather boots were long gone, sold for food. Outside, in the alley, a man huddled under a cardboard box, coughing into a ragged coat. Marcus had lost the will to fight weeks ago. The banishment had stripped him of his alpha power, leaving him weak and aging rapidly. They had nothing. No pack, no money, no dignity. Jessica looked out the window at her father. She thought of Alara, the runt, the girl she had tormented for years. She heard rumors, even this far south. Rumors of the wolfless queen who ruled the Blackwood pack with wisdom and grace. Rumors of the Beast King who worshipped the ground she walked on. Jessica dipped her rag into the freezing gray water. It was the same color as the water Alara used to scrub the pack house floors. The irony was a bitter pill that choked her every single day. She started scrubbing. It was all she had left. Chapter 20. Back at the castle, Alara was feeling off. For a week, the smell of roasted meat, usually her favorite, had made her stomach turn. She was tired, a bone-deep exhaustion that even sleeping in Kaelin's arms couldn't fix. "Are you ill?" Kaelin asked one evening, watching her push her dinner around her plate. His anxiety spiked through the bond. "I call the healer." "No," Alara said, though she felt dizzy. "I'm fine, just tired." But Kaelin was already moving. The pack healer, an ancient woman named Oriah, arrived 10 minutes later. She ran her hands over Alara's stomach, her eyes closed in concentration. Kaelin paced the room like a caged tiger, his growls low and constant. "Well?" he demanded. "Is it a fever? Poison?" Oriah opened her eyes. She looked at Alara, then at Kaelin. A slow smile spread across her wrinkled face. "It is not poison, my king. It is life." Kaelin froze. "Life?" "The Luna is with child." The silence in the room was absolute. Alara's hand flew to her stomach. A baby. She looked at Kaelin. He had gone pale. He stared at her midsection with a look of pure terror. A pup?" he whispered. "But she's human. Is it safe? Will she survive?" "She is strong," Oriah said, "and the pup is strong. I sense a powerful wolf spirit already." Kaelin fell to his knees beside the chair. He buried his face in Alara's lap, his large hands trembling as he covered her stomach. "A family," he choked out. "You gave me back my mind. You gave me back my kingdom. And now, a family." Alara ran her fingers through his hair, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Not a monster," she whispered, echoing the words she had said in the dungeon so long ago. "Just a father." Epilogue. 2 years later. The sun was setting over the cliffs. Kaelin sat on the grass, a massive black wolf. Climbing all over him was a toddler, a little boy with messy black hair and eyes that shifted between brown and gold. The boy tugged on Kaelin's ear. Kaelin let out a dramatic, playful growl and nudged the boy with his nose, making him shriek with laughter. Alara watched from the porch, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. Another one on the way. She thought back to the girl scrubbing floors in the cold, the girl who thought she was nothing. She looked at her king, rolling in the grass with their son. She looked at the castle that was no longer a prison, but a home. Fate had been cruel to them both once, but in the end, it had given them everything. Kaelin looked up, sensing her gaze. He shifted back to human form, effortlessly scooping the boy into his arms. He walked toward her, his face full of a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Come inside, my love," he said, kissing her forehead. "It's getting cold." "I'm not cold." Alara smiled, leaning into him. "I haven't been cold since the day I met you." They walked inside together, and the heavy door closed, shutting out the dark, shutting out the past, leaving only the warmth of the fire and the future they had built from the ashes. Thank you so much for listening to the Alpha's Soul. I hope you loved Kaylin and Alara's journey. If you did, please leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel grow. See you in the next story. Love, Amy.